which is an imitation of reality that is given to people from a very early age. And it looks and feels and smells like reality, but it isn't. It's just a fabricated version of it that is designed to keep one's awareness really at a very low vibration. So that's where I come from, and we can explore that in detail if you wish, but that's the outline of it, that there is this thing which I call the construct, which is a synthetic entity, and it masquerades as the real world. But when you really scrutinize it, and when you go forward into it with a complete authentic heart and with conscious will, it starts to fall apart, and you realize that it isn't actually real. But it's so proliferated, it's been so widely accepted, and there's such official consensus from the majority of people walking around on this planet, that to say that and to think that and to believe that sounds crazy. So it's something that one has to approach quite sensitively, but more and more people are coming to that conclusion all of their own accord, quite frankly.
Yeah, and Neil, that's great. And I don't really want to spend the whole show on this because we could easily, I know. So why don't you just give us a little bit of perhaps an example of one of the ways that this natural slumber gets taken into a coma?
Well, the basic thing is that human beings are tuned naturally to interact with the real world at a number of levels. Obviously, as animals, we also have a flesh and blood and bone element to us, which would be a mistake to ignore. A lot of people in the spiritual community tend to overlook that, but it's part of our training and it's part of our discovery to be an animal, to be a flesh and blood entity. And that's a significant aspect to our being. But there is another one, which is what you might call the higher dimensional aspect, or the fourth dimensional aspect to us, which isn't bound by cause and effect and physicality in the same way that our body is. And so I would say that our mind, for example, is not just epiphenomenal to the brain. It's not just like a conscious kind of byproduct. It is actually what I would refer to as a transdimensional object, in that it exists in the 4D, but it can be felt in the 3D through our consciousness, through our felt experience of daily life. Now, when that is subverted, that flow of consciousness from the 4D, and is contained only in the 3D, then people's lives kind of collapse down from the magical wonder it is to be a human being. And it becomes a very prosaic and a very dull existence, very repetitive. And when everybody's saying it, like the astronauts and the movie stars and the doctors and the business people and mothers and fathers, when everybody agrees with that consciousness really is just for the body and it's just for gathering resources and procreating, then in many ways we also agree to it, because that weight of consensus is very, very difficult to pull away from. And repetition is a very important part of that. So, as we all know, from the age of sort of 0 to 7, you're taught by repetition. And so this construct, this containment of consciousness only on a 3D level, is conditioned into everybody, particularly in the West, in Europe and America and Canada and so on, is conditioned into everybody from a very early age. So part of my work is to show how that happens, to show that it's not a natural process, and to give some techniques and strategies to begin to detach and decondition from that, so you can actually contact reality in a very, very pure and sincere way, with no filters that are false, basically. So life becomes kind of more magical again, more vivid and more real.
Well, Neil, that's phenomenal, and we're actually almost coming up to our first break in a second, but it's just amazing how the synchronicity is happening. So tomorrow is what's called Michaelmas Day, which is the day that we celebrate Archangel Michael. And what you're actually talking about is the struggle between Michael and the dragon, in terms of the confinement to the third dimensional realm and going beyond that to the spiritual realm. And as you say, it's about finding balance. It's not about one or the other. It's marrying the two together, which again connects into the Libra energy that we're also just
it is.
Into.
It is. It's a recognition that we're multidimensional, and it's a funny thing for people to think about that. How can we be in two spaces or at two densities at the same time? But we are. We're fundamentally multidimensional, and that is so quickly forgotten. And that kind of spiritual amnesia can last for days, weeks, months, years, a whole lifetime. And so to wake people up from that, you first need to persuade them that they need to take that decision for themselves, because life purely trapped in the 3D is not really normal. It's not really natural. So we have to sort of upturn that whole paradigm, really.
So, Neil, we're coming up to our first break, and I'm going to continue this discussion, and I'm really glad you've got some techniques and strategies to help us through this. This is Peter Tung for Awakening to Conscious Co-Creation.
Be extraordinary. Seventh Wave Network.
Do you want to reach your highest potential in your personal and business life? Come and join our heart-centered community with Peter Tung and Sherry Chase. Embrace love, abundance, integrity, and personal empowerment in a safe and sacred space for your awakening. Our intention is to lay the groundwork for you to advance your awareness sufficiently to be fully involved in the conscious co-creation of peace and prosperity on our beautiful planet. Go to myheartcenteredjourney.com for more information.
The new home for visionary positive change. Seventh Wave Network.
You're listening to Awakening to Conscious Co-Creation with Peter Tung. If you have a question for Peter or comment on this series, please send an email to descendingdove@gmail.com. That's descendingdove@gmail.com. Now back to our program.
Welcome back to Awakening to Conscious Co-Creation with your host, Peter Tung. Just want to remind you of my own website, www.petertung.com. Lots of great information there, and my newsletter for October will be coming out at the end of this week. A couple of big articles on the energies of September and moving into October, and also our Virgo workshop, which was absolutely phenomenal, and quite amused to hear Neil speaking at the beginning about those Virgo tendencies, which we now know all about. And also the Ambassadors of Light class tomorrow through myheartcenteredjourney.com. And I'll be talking there actually about the energies of Archangel Michael and the dragon and what that really is all about, as well as involving the energies of Libra and how we actually find the balance point that actually Neil is talking about in his talk today. So, Neil, I know from my own experience with people who actually do begin that awakening journey and begin to realize the 3D trap, one of the biggest issues that people seem to face instantaneously, immediately, is the loss of material security and basically no money. I mean, when I gave up my job as a school principal, I went from total security, material security, to absolutely nothing. So just talk a little bit about how that fits into this puzzle.
The universe supports human beings in their unfoldment absolutely and 100%. And that is a reciprocal process. And so to receive support, you actually have to give something of your own consciousness back. And that cycle works beautifully when one is aligned with one's actual path. If somebody, let us say, comes to their process of awakening midway through life, and they have children and wives and jobs and mortgages and pensions and insurance and goodness knows what, all those things, all the accoutrements of a so-called normal life, then you can pretty much guarantee that along with those things came quite a heavy amount of conditioning from the construct that we mentioned earlier. And the construct has various lines of code in it, shall we say, a bit like a computer application. And one of those lines of code is always make sure that you plan for the future by hoarding. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, the universe doesn't require anybody necessarily